When I look back now, I can't believe how quickly my life spun out of control. A year ago, I was just another ordinary boy trying to keep my head down at school, drifting through the days, never really standing out, never really drawing attention. I wasn't the most athletic, the smartest, or the most popular. I existed in that in-between space where you aren't noticed enough to be admired, but not invisible enough to be forgotten. I thought that kind of life was safe. But safety is an illusion, and I learned that in the cruelest way. It all started with a dare. That's the part that makes me laugh bitterly even now, because it could have been avoided if I'd just walked away. But peer pressure has a way of digging into you when you're 16, when every word, every glance, every laugh feels like it defines who you are. I was sitting in the cafeteria when Tyler, the loudest, cruelest boy in our year, leaned across the table with that smirk that always spelled trouble. "You know what would be hilarious?" he said, loud enough for half the room to hear. "If we made him come to school as a girl. I bet no one would even recognize him." The laughter that followed burned through me. I shook my head, tried to brush it off, but Tyler wasn't done. He pushed and prodded until it wasn't just a joke anymore. It became a challenge. A punishment. I had embarrassed him the week before when I beat him during a quiz in class, something he couldn't stand. And now he wanted payback. The rules of teenage survival are simple. Don't make enemies of the ones who can ruin you. But I had already broken that rule, and soon enough I paid for it. Within days, rumors spread. A bet had been placed. If I didn't show up to school dressed like a girl, the humiliation would be worse than I could imagine. At first, I thought they would forget, that high school gossip would move on to some other victim. But it didn't. The whispers only grew louder, and then came the threats. Notes stuffed in my locker, cruel messages online, faces grinning at me in the hallway, waiting for me to break. I went home each night with a knot in my stomach, too afraid to tell my parents, too ashamed to even admit what was happening. But then came the day Tyler cornered me outside the library with two of his friends. "It's happening Monday," he sneered. "New girl at school. You miss it, and we'll make your life a living nightmare." I wanted to fight back. I wanted to scream. But the truth was, I didn't have the strength. I was already drowning, and resistance would only push me under faster. So that weekend, in a haze of fear and desperation, I did the unthinkable. I found myself digging through my sister's closet while she was out with friends, pulling out skirts, blouses, anything that could fit. My hands shook the whole time, sweat dripping down my back. I caught my reflection in the mirror, holding up a floral dress, and for a moment, I didn't even recognize myself. A wave of shame crushed me, but underneath it, buried so deep I almost missed it, was something else. A flicker of curiosity. A question I didn't dare name. Sunday night, I barely slept. The clothes lay folded in a bag under my bed, every thread burning with the weight of the decision I was about to make. By Monday morning, I felt sick. My hands trembled as I slipped on the skirt, the blouse, the wig I had borrowed from a forgotten Halloween costume box. Makeup clumsily painted my face, lipstick smeared until I wiped it off and tried again. When I finally stood before the mirror, I almost couldn't breathe. The boy I knew was gone. In his place was someone softer, unfamiliar, vulnerable. I wanted to rip it all off. I wanted to scream and cry and run away. But then my phone buzzed, a message from Tyler. "Better see you today, princess." So I forced myself out the door, every step heavier than the last. The walk to school felt like marching to my own execution. People on the street stared. Some snickered, some whispered, and each glance cut into me like a blade. By the time I reached the school gates, I wanted to disappear. But then the whispers started. Heads turned. Laughter rang out. And there I was, standing in the middle of the courtyard, the new girl at school, not by choice, but by force. And that was the beginning of everything. The moment I stepped into the school courtyard dressed as the so-called new girl, it felt like every eye burned into me. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Laughter rippled through the air, and then came the pointing. A few kids even pulled out their phones, snapping pictures as though I were nothing more than a spectacle. My stomach twisted so tightly, I thought I might collapse. Tyler was leaning against the wall near the main doors, arms crossed, grinning like a predator. Well, well, he called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. Looks like the new girl showed up after all. His friends howled with laughter, and I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. Walking through the crowd was torture. Every step of my heels clicking on the pavement felt amplified, every strand of the cheap wig itching against my scalp reminding me I wasn't supposed to be here like this. The skirt clung to my legs in ways that made me hyper-aware of every movement. I kept my head down, praying to make it inside without crying. But humiliation has a way of finding you. In the hallway, a group of girls blocked my path. One of them tilted her head, studying me as though I were an experiment. "Cute," she said mockingly. "Where'd you learn to walk like that?" Another one giggled, tugging at the hem of my skirt before I could swat her hand away. My face burned. I stammered something, my voice cracking in a way that betrayed me instantly. More laughter followed. I thought the day would never end. Teachers gave me puzzled looks but said nothing. Some students sneered, others whispered, and a few simply stared with wide eyes, unsure what to make of me. Every classroom felt like a spotlight, every moment a test of endurance. Yet somewhere in the middle of that nightmare, something unexpected happened. In my second period, as I sat hunched at the back of the class trying to be invisible, a girl named Emily slid into the seat beside me. She was one of those people who carried kindness in her smile, someone I had admired from afar but never dared to approach. She leaned close and whispered, "Don't let them get to you." I blinked, stunned. "What?" She gave a small shrug, her eyes soft. "They're just bored. Half of them wish they had your guts. Honestly, you look pretty convincing." My chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with something I couldn't name. Convincing. The word echoed in my head. She wasn't mocking me, she meant it. For the first time all day, I felt a flicker of relief. Of course, relief was fleeting. At lunch, Tyler wasn't content with just watching me squirm. He stood on top of a cafeteria bench, raising his voice to command attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our newest student." He pointed at me, and dozens of heads swiveled. "She doesn't have a name yet, though. What should we call her?" Names flew across the room like arrows. Some cruel, some ridiculous. I felt myself shrinking smaller and smaller, wishing I could disappear. But then Emily spoke up again, this time loud enough for others to hear. "How about Claire?" she said firmly. "It suits her." The cafeteria erupted in laughter, but Emily didn't flinch. She gave me a quick, encouraging glance, as though to say, "Own it." And somehow I did. My lips moved before I could stop myself. "Claire," I whispered. And just like that, the name stuck. It should have felt like another humiliation, being given a girl's name, having it chanted mockingly across the room. But instead, something strange stirred inside me. When they called me Claire, it wasn't just a taunt. It was an identity, however forced, and part of me wondered what it meant that hearing it didn't feel entirely wrong. The rest of the day passed in a blur of whispers, stares, and snickers. By the time the final bell rang, I was drained, hollowed out by the weight of it all. I wanted nothing more than to rip off the clothes, the wig, the makeup, and pretend none of it had ever happened. But as I walked out of the building, Emily caught up with me. "Hey, Claire," she said casually, as though the name had always been mine. She gave me a small smile. "If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm around." Her words lingered with me long after I left the school grounds. And that night, when I finally stood in front of my mirror and peeled off the wig, I didn't just see the boy I used to be staring back at me. I saw the ghost of Claire too. And I couldn't tell which version of me felt more real. The days that followed were a strange blur, like I was living in someone else's body, someone else's life. At first, I thought I could endure it, just play along until Tyler got bored, until he found someone else to torment. But Tyler didn't get bored. If anything, he doubled down. Every morning, waiting at the school gates, he'd shove the wig into my hands, a folded skirt, a blouse, sometimes even lipstick. "Don't forget who you are," he'd sneer, loud enough for others to hear. And the whispers would start before I even walked inside. The weird part was, it wasn't always whispers of cruelty. Some people laughed, yes, but others studied me with something closer to curiosity. A few even seemed to accept this Claire persona without question, like I belonged to this world they'd always known. And that's what unsettled me most, because the more they saw me as Claire, the more I started seeing her too. At home, I tried to bury it. I'd lock my door, strip off the clothes, and shove them deep into the back of my closet. But the mirror had a way of betraying me. I'd catch myself tilting my head, noticing the way my hair, though short, framed my face if I brushed it forward. I'd stare at my lips, wondering what they'd look like with a touch of color. And worst of all, sometimes I'd whisper the name Claire just to hear how it sounded in the quiet. Emily didn't make things easier. She'd sit with me at lunch now, chat with me in class, and casually call me Claire like it was the most natural thing in the world. She didn't laugh at me. She didn't look at me with pity. She just accepted me. One afternoon, she even leaned over during study hall and whispered, "You should try eyeliner. It would really make your eyes pop." I laughed nervously, shaking my head. "Very funny." "I'm serious," she said, her gaze steady. "If you're going to play this role, you might as well own it." Own it. The words clung to me like a secret I wasn't ready to admit. But Tyler wasn't about to let me choose how this transformation unfolded. By the third week, he upped the stakes. He cornered me in the locker room, shoving a small bag into my chest. "New rules," he said, his smirk cruel. "From now on, Claire doesn't just exist at school. She exists everywhere. You show up tomorrow without the stuff, and I'll make sure everyone sees what you look like underneath." Videos. Pictures. Gone viral in seconds. Your choice. Panic wrapped around my throat like a noose. I hated how much power he held over me, how easily he could unravel the fragile thread of normalcy I clung to. But when I opened the bag later, in the privacy of my room, my breath caught. Inside wasn't just another skirt or blouse, it was a dress. Soft fabric, pale blue, delicate. It wasn't something meant to humiliate. It was something meant to transform. I sat on my bed staring at it, for what felt like hours. My hands trembled as I lifted it, the material whispering between my fingers. Against my will, curiosity bloomed. I slipped it over my head, and as it settled around me, something shifted inside. My reflection in the mirror was awkward, yes, but also startling. The dress hung differently than the skirts I'd worn before. It gave shape to me, softened me. For the first time, I didn't just look like a boy forced into girls' clothes. I looked like someone else entirely. I looked like Claire. That realization scared me more than anything Tyler could threaten. The next day at school, the laughter was sharper, louder. Tyler strutted past me in the hallway announcing, "Doesn't she look lovely today?" But underneath the noise, I noticed something else. Eyes following me, not with cruelty, but with something more complex. Admiration. Envy. Curiosity. For the first time, not every glance felt like a knife. And that terrified me most of all because deep down I didn't hate it. That night, lying awake staring at the ceiling, I realized something dangerous. Tyler might have forced me into this role, but part of me was starting to choose it. By the time the fourth week rolled around, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. Every morning I told myself I hated it, that slipping into those clothes, pulling on the wig, painting faint lines of makeup across my face, was just part of Tyler's cruel game. But there was a whispering voice inside me, soft but persistent, saying, "You don't hate it as much as you think." And that whisper scared me more than Tyler ever could. The school had shifted too. At first, my presence was a circus act, something for everyone to gawk at and laugh about. But people adapt quickly. Soon, Claire wasn't just the freak show, she was a regular sight in the hallways. Teachers had stopped raising their eyebrows, students had stopped pointing. I was just there. Sometimes mocked, yes, but sometimes ignored. And sometimes noticed in ways I couldn't explain. Emily noticed most of all. She'd started giving me little things. A bracelet she said would finish the look, a headband she claimed suited my face shape. At first I resisted, but she always had this way of convincing me, her smile disarming, her voice warm. The bracelet clasped around my wrist felt light, but its weight was undeniable. It wasn't just an accessory. It was a piece of the puzzle I was becoming. One afternoon, as we walked home together, she glanced sideways at me. "You've gotten good at this, you know." My heart jumped. "Good at what?" She smirked playfully. "Being Claire." I looked away, heat rushing to my face. "I don't have a choice." "Maybe not at first," she said quietly. "But lately it seems like you do." Her words lingered long after she left me at my door. And that night, staring at my reflection, I couldn't deny it. My movements had softened. My voice, when I spoke carefully, no longer cracked the way it once did. My posture, my gestures, the way I tilted my head, it was all changing. Tyler may have forced me into this, but I was the one filling in the gaps, adding the details. I wasn't just surviving. I was adapting. But Tyler wasn't done. He thrived on control, and he could see it slipping. One morning, he shoved me into the bathroom before first period, tossing a small makeup bag onto the counter. "You're not half-assing it anymore," he hissed. "From now on, you go all in. Foundation, eyeliner, the works. If you're going to play the new girl, then you'd better be convincing." I froze, staring at the bag. My reflection stared back, pale and uncertain. I wanted to scream at him, to throw it back in his face. But instead, I picked it up with trembling hands. Because deep down, I was terrified of something worse than his threats. I was terrified of what I might feel if I actually followed through. That afternoon, I walked into class with makeup carefully blended across my skin, eyeliner flicked across my lids, mascara darkening my lashes. The laughter I expected never came. Instead, silence rippled through the room. Then whispers. Then something I never imagined. A boy in the back muttering, almost under his breath, "She's pretty." The word jolted me. Not mocking, not sarcastic. Honest. My chest tightened as if I couldn't breathe. Emily caught my eye and gave me the smallest nod of approval. But that moment was short-lived. Later that week, Tyler tried to humiliate me again. He called me to the center of the cafeteria, holding up his phone like he was filming some kind of reality show. "All right, everyone," he declared, "let's give Claire her big debut. Why don't you show us how a real lady walks?" The room erupted with cheers and taunts. My legs shook, my palms slick with sweat. I wanted to run to hide. But then I saw Emily across the room, her lips silently forming words meant only for me. "You can do this." And somehow I did. I lifted my chin, straightened my shoulders, and walked. Heels clicking, steps measured, back straight. The laughter didn't come this time. Instead, a hush settled. I could feel dozens of eyes following me, but it wasn't ridicule I felt. It was something closer to awe. Tyler's smirk faltered. Just for a second, but I saw it. When I sat back down, my hands still trembling, Emily leaned close. "See? You're stronger than he is." Stronger. The word wrapped around me like armor. For the first time, I realized Tyler didn't own me. He could push, he could humiliate, but he couldn't control the part of me that was starting to embrace this identity. That night, standing before my mirror, I traced the line of eyeliner still smudged under my eyes, the bracelet on my wrist, the way the clothes no longer felt like a costume. And the whispering voice inside me grew louder. It wasn't just saying, "You don't hate this." It was saying, "This feels like who you are." By the 5th week, I no longer recognized the person staring back at me in the mirror. The boy I had once been, the one who hid behind hoodies, slouched shoulders, and awkward silence, was fading. In his place stood someone softer, more deliberate, more certain with every gesture. Claire wasn't just a mask I wore at school anymore. She was creeping into every corner of my life, changing the way I moved, the way I spoke, even the way I thought. And that terrified me. Tyler, of course, refused to loosen his grip. Every day, he found new ways to assert his power. One morning, he shoved a box into my locker. Inside was a pair of shoes, delicate ballet flats, clearly meant to cement the image he'd crafted for me. His note read, "Wear these or else." I wanted to throw them away, to stomp them into dust. But when I slipped them on, they fit perfectly. My reflection in the hallway mirror looked almost natural, like I had always been meant to wear them. I hated how much I didn't hate it. The breaking point came on a Friday afternoon when Tyler cornered me in front of the entire cafeteria. He climbed onto the table again, his voice dripping with cruelty. "All right, everyone," he announced. "We've all been wondering, who is Claire really? Is she one of us? Or just a joke in disguise?" He motioned for me to stand. "Prove it. Tell us who you are." The room went silent. Dozens of eyes locked on me. My throat went dry, my palms clammy. This was it, the moment Tyler had been building toward, the moment where he could expose me as a fraud, destroy whatever fragile ground I'd gained. I opened my mouth, ready to deny it all, to rip away the wig, to scream that I wasn't Claire, that I had been forced into this. But then my gaze found Emily. She wasn't laughing. She wasn't pitying me. She was looking at me with quiet strength, urging me to decide for myself. And for the first time, I realized the truth. Tyler hadn't created Claire.
I had.
He may have forced the first steps, but every choice after, every smile, every soft gesture, every piece of myself that had slipped into this role had been mine. I took a shaky breath, my voice trembling but clear. "My name is Claire." A ripple moved through the room. Some gasps, some murmurs, some laughter. Tyler's smirk widened, as though he thought I had just played into his hands. But then something unexpected happened. A girl near the front said softly, "I knew it." Another one clapped. Then Emily stood and called out, "Welcome, Claire." The cafeteria erupted, not in cruel laughter, but in something new. Some clapped, some cheered, some simply nodded. Not everyone, of course. Some sneered, some whispered. But the tide had shifted. Tyler's grin faltered, his moment of triumph stolen. He sneered at me, but when he tried to mock me, his words drowned beneath the noise of acceptance. For the first time, he wasn't in control. Afterward, Emily walked me home. Neither of us said much at first, the weight of the day still heavy. Finally, she broke the silence. "You know, you don't have to thank me. You did that yourself." I swallowed hard. "I don't even know who I am anymore." She smiled gently. "Maybe you don't need to know yet. Maybe it's enough to just be." That night, I stood before my mirror once more. The wig, the makeup, the clothes, they weren't costumes anymore. They were possibilities. I touched the bracelet Emily had given me, staring at my reflection, at Claire staring back. For the first time, I didn't feel trapped. I felt free. I had been forced into this life, yes. Humiliated, mocked, pushed to the edge. But somewhere along the way, I had discovered a truth I never expected. Claire wasn't the end of me. She was the beginning. And as I whispered my name to the girl in the mirror, a shiver ran through me, not of fear, but of certainty. "My name is Claire," I said. "And I'm not hiding anymore."